Tonight, those who survived are still trying to get in touch with their family members to tell them they're all right. News 4's Chris Negus is live in Aurora, Colorado with one of their stories. Chris.
We are here in Aurora, Colorado, outside the shopping center, outside the movie theater where this massacre took place during the midnight showing of Batman last night. Investigators still on the scene. There is yellow crime scene tape that surrounds this entire shopping center, which is closed today. I would describe this area as similar to what you would see around the Chesterfield Mall, Chesterfield Valley area. You can see the gunman's car across the street. Investigators are currently going through that car looking for evidence. There is a lot of media here. There are a lot of people here. Just up the street, a local high school where the victims and their families are looking for answers. Now, I can also tell you a San Antonio woman was among the victims. She was one of the women that was shot last night in the movie theater. She was there with friend Brent Lowak. He was visiting from Texas when they decided to go see a movie. Our sister station in San Antonio was there when Lowak's father got the phone call describing what happened. We are told Lowak was also shot and underwent surgery to have shrapnel removed from his shoulder. He is doing okay today. His father describes that phone call as chilling.
I'd gotten up and I was headed toward the showers, and my wife said the phone rang. It was Brent. And I said, Brent? She goes, yeah, there was some kind of shooting in Colorado or something. And she goes, and I didn't hear whether he was, you know, everything. She says, I assume everything was okay. And I said, whoa. And I kind of went back to bed thinking about that, and then called back later. And well, anyway, we found out that he was shot and that his girlfriend was killed.
Back here live in Aurora, Colorado. Just moments ago, I spoke to a pastor at a local church. He told me a member of his congregation was actually in the theater directly next door to the theater where this massacre took place, and that a female member of his congregation saw or heard the shots actually coming through the walls. Obviously, those young victims are traumatized today. The pastor is talking to those family members, trying to bring them some comfort today. He compared this to what happened here several years ago at Columbine High School. This community obviously all too familiar with a mass shooting. I can tell you the gunman in this case, as we mentioned, is 24 years old. We are told he will be arraigned on Monday. We will be here live in Aurora, Colorado throughout the evening, gathering new information and bringing it to you live on News 4 at 6 and 10 o'clock, along with KMOV.com. Reporting live in Aurora, Colorado, Chris Negus, News 4.
Chris, thank you very much. Great reporting as usual. And the coverage of the theater shooting doesn't stop here.
Nicely.
Coming up at 5.
We continue to follow this developing situation as the community and the country is in shock this evening after the tragic rampage. News 4's Chris Negus begins our live News 4 team coverage. Chris is live near Denver in Aurora, Colorado with more on this horrible tragedy. Chris?
And Robin, I am outside the Aurora Mall, right outside the movie theater where this happened. Police tape surrounds the scene. Most of the local Denver media, about a quarter of a mile this way, were actually able to shoot a little bit closer with the technology, live view technology, that photojournalist Steve Gurley is using. And from our vantage point, you can see the gunman's car parked right outside the door where he walked into that movie theater packed with people during that midnight shooting and started shooting people randomly. Now, as he walked in, we are told he threw some kind of a device, an explosive device, into the crowd. I actually spoke with 2 high school age girls. They told me right after 1 o'clock this morning, people started texting them to say that their friend Bree was in the theater, that she was hospitalized with some kind of chemical burn, as they describe it, from that device that was thrown into the crowd to distract people as that gunman started shooting. Now, at 5 o'clock, I compared this area to what you would see around Chesterfield Mall or the Chesterfield Valley. This is a very suburban area, and it's caught these people in shock out here in Aurora, Colorado. I also spoke with a pastor at a local church. He says a member of his congregation was in the next theater over when the gunshots started coming through the wall. Luckily, the member of his congregation was not injured, but traumatized. Today, that pastor out here counseling victims, he says this shooting rampage has devastated this community.
I think that everybody's shaken up, and it's been some years since we had another tragedy, and so...
and you're referring to Columbine?
Yeah, and so just it's hard to believe that something like this could happen again. And this isn't a bad area, but someone just gets off focus.
Back here live in Aurora, Colorado, you can see the gunman's car. We are told weapons were found in that vehicle. Investigators still out here at this hour. In fact, there are police all over the place as this shopping center, this movie theater remain closed as this investigation continues. Now, the 24-year-old gunman, he lived in an apartment not far from here. News reports in this area tell us his apartment was booby-trapped. Those are the words they are using. Investigators still at that scene working to get in. There is a high school just up the street here. That's where family, friends, and victims are going for information. But this is still a very active scene out here in Aurora, Colorado. We are going to stay on the scene and continue to gather information, bring you live reports tonight on News 4 at 10 o'clock and on KMOV.com. Reporting live in Aurora, Colorado, Chris Nagus, News 4.
Thanks, Chris. One family in Lake
We
St.
sent Chris Nagus out to Aurora, Colorado to bring you more on this story. And Chris, I understand you were able to track down a man who was one of the shooting victims.
That's right, Jasmine. We've been here all afternoon, all night. We've talked to a lot of people who are directly impacted by this tragedy that took place at the Century 16 theaters behind me in Aurora. They remain closed. It is a giant crime scene. Now, that victim we spoke to, he was walking around in the mall parking lot with a sling. He told us that he was hit by metal shrapnel when bullets started flying.
I got hurt. Like I said, my friend Rebecca got hurt. Everybody around me is affected, if you got wounded or not. Like, you walk away with some scar from that. There was just so much chaos, turmoil, people crying, people laying on the street, bleeding. I mean, it was just the most, like, it was almost out of the worst movie that you can find.
Marcus Weaver showed us the puncture wounds in his shoulder. He said his friend Rebecca is still missing tonight and unaccounted for. He prays that she is still alive, but the situation is not sounding good. Now, we talked to a lot of people out here who knew someone that was injured. Also talked to one man who had a ticket to that midnight showing, but was late to the movie. By the time he arrived, the rampage was in full effect. He pulled victims out of that theater. We also spoke with CBS anchorman Scott Pelley. He has covered stories like this on the national level for many years. We asked him to compare this incident, this theater shooting, to his coverage at the Columbine High School, where a shooting took place just a few miles from here.
What's similar is just the complete senselessness of it all. I mean, all of those people, all of those kids at Columbine killed for no good reason, no understandable reason. And then here we have this situation that's unfathomable. I mean, at the end of the day, I predict we'll never have a good motive for why this happened. It will never make sense to most folks in this country.
And back here live in Aurora, Colorado, this crime is obviously on the minds of people everywhere in this community. It has devastated this community as they try to move on. We will be here through the weekend providing live coverage on our air and on KMOV.com. Live in Aurora, Colorado, Chris Nagus, News 4.
Thank you, Chris. Tonight, movie theaters all over the country are beefing.
Yesterday, police disarmed tripwires and explosive devices that authorities say were set up to kill people inside Holmes's third-floor apartment. News 4's Chris Nagus is in Aurora, Colorado with the latest.
That was the sound of ATF agents setting off their own explosive device designed to dismantle the tripwire left behind by the gunman. It was the work of a man people in this Aurora neighborhood described as quiet and unassuming.
I was waiting for the picture to come on TV, and as soon as I saw the picture, goosebumps. I mean, I got goosebumps because I recognized him right off the bat.
Sabrina Bricko works at the liquor store down the street from Holmes' apartment. So does Leroy Henderson.
He's a friendly guy. Never caused any problems or anything. He'd just come in, get what he wanted, and, pay for it, and then he'd leave.
What'd he typically buy?
Beer or maybe whiskey once in a while.
They say they never expected something like this. Inside Holmes' 800-square-foot apartment, investigators found 30 explosive devices set up in the living room. The modest apartment is a short drive to the Century 16 Theater, where Holmes is accused of shooting 70 people, killing 12. Today, a makeshift memorial is growing. Tracy Pearson says her son was supposed to be at the midnight showing.
And I couldn't reach him right away. And, panic set in.
She says for some reason her son chose another theater instead. All weekend I've heard from victims. This man was shot in the shoulder. This woman played dead to avoid getting shot.
I could hear his footsteps, creeping closer and closer, and that was really starting to make me freak out at that point. I was trying to stay calm for everybody.
Did you think you were going to die last night?
Oh, definitely. I had a gun in my face.
The theater remains a crime scene. This Aurora family can't imagine ever coming back.
I mean, how do you go and sit in the movie theater where this happened and not be watching the door instead of the movie?
Chris will join us live this morning with more updates. That's coming up around 7:30 on News. News 4's Chris Nagus is there live covering every angle of this for us. And Chris, what is the latest this morning?
Well, good morning, Deanna. It has been a busy night for investigators here in Aurora, Colorado. It is pretty quiet this morning, as you can see. This apartment building, the third floor apartment that belongs to suspected gunman James Holmes. You can see the windows are knocked out. The reason those windows are knocked out, that is the way that investigators gained access into that booby-trapped apartment. They were successful at defusing the explosive devices that were set up inside that apartment. We are told there were 30 explosive devices set up in and around that apartment. One investigator here in Aurora, Colorado says that apartment was designed to kill anyone that entered. Now you are seeing video from yesterday. You can hear those air horns in a moment. You'll hear the blast that took place as they detonated the tripwire that led into that apartment. Now, it is one train of thought here in Aurora, Colorado that tripwire and those explosives were set up to distract police officials. It was timed to happen as that rampage occurred at the Century 16 movie theater just a short distance from here in Aurora, Colorado. But again, back here live in Aurora, it's a pretty quiet morning. At this time, residents are not allowed to return to the building where the suspect lived. They have officers out here that are standing watch in front of that apartment. We are not sure when residents will be able to return, but I can tell you yesterday when we were out here, there was a 4-block perimeter set up around this building where residents were evacuated from nearby buildings because of the threat of explosion here in this area. That threat is now gone, and just a quiet morning beginning here this Sunday morning here in Aurora, Colorado. Deanna?
Well, Chris, you mentioned something about a distraction, and maybe those tripwires were set up as a distraction. Is the idea that police would be busy responding to the alleged shooter's apartment instead of being able to respond at the movie theater? Is that the theory?
That is correct, Deanna. In fact, there's an amazing story about the resident who lived in that apartment below the suspect. In fact, the suspect, we are told, had loud music that was timed to go off right around midnight. So it was very loud. That resident went upstairs, knocked on the door, threatened to call the police, and she actually checked the doorknob, and she was about to enter. The door was actually loose or kind of ajar, or kind of open, but luckily she did not, because had she gone into that apartment, there may have been an explosion. Of course, you would have had a lot of police officers here in Aurora that would have been responding to this scene as that other scene was erupting a few miles away.
Oh, wow. That thought just gives me chills. All right, thanks a lot. Chris Nagus live for us in Aurora, Colorado. Chris is